Hello Seekers, are you ready to get maledicted? So come with me because today we are going to talk about Husk's anti-ray placement, a vital topic in the malediction world. If you like this kind of content, make sure to click here on the subscribe button and stay tuned for more content. Before we dive in to choose the terrain and choose the Husk's placements, we have to follow a few steps, okay? The first thing we have to do is know your Seeker. Before choosing the terrain or before choosing the placements you are going to do in the game, you have to understand your Seeker's strengths and weaknesses. This is the most important thing you have to do before you jump ahead to more advanced strategies. Well, all of you already know all the 8 Seekers we have available as of the recording of this video, and all of them can be built in several other ways, right? We can build a Polynor deck focused on spellcasting, or we can build a Polynor deck focused on ranged units. I can have Ingor focus on suicide my units or focus on ambush. Well, every Seeker has a very array of different builds you can go for. Regardless of what kind of build you are going for, you have to understand that each of them have advantages and disadvantages, right? So be focused on that. You have to choose a terrain that fits the most in your strategy. So think with yourselves, what's the main strength of my deck? Am I playing Thundersteps, which is a very heavy hitter, focus on melee units that have to engage my opponents as quick as possible? Well, I might want a Asterisk Pathway. Or am I playing Thundersteps deck that has the strong units, but it's more towards Swarm? Because then I have to have numbers, not only make them jumping fast. They are already fast units, but they have to survive. Well, I might choose the Deathshot Mire to make sure they won't be attacked while they are engaging. Well, regardless of the strengths, you think with yourself about your deck building. You have to also consider what aspects of your warband you would like to enhance or to compensate. Because the strengths you already know, you build your deck thinking about that specific combo that will kill your opponents. And the weaknesses you want to compensate for using your terrain. So besides the Seekers, the knowledge of the Seekers, we have to understand the 4 terrains we have available today. We have the Noxious Round, which deals damage when a unit enters or starts its activation there. Starcast Hall, that reduces the channel cost for spells. Deathshot Mire, that blocks line of sight and allows units with ambush to be deployed there. And the Asterisk Pathway, that boosts the movement for a unit that's activating on the terrain. You have to bear in mind that every single terrain is available for both you and your opponents, right? So it's not a buff that you are giving to your warband. It's a condition you are placing on the battlefront, right? With that in mind, you can choose better if you want to protect your units or compensate your weaknesses, or if you want to enhance your game. To make that choice, you have just to balance if the buff that you are providing, for example, cost reduction from Starcast Hall, it's better for you than for your opponents. Of course, every single warband has a lot of channel spells, but you have to agree with me that Polynor has more channel spells than, let's say, Sigurd. That's a very reactive deck, or even Londriel, that's also a very reactive deck. So you can take the most out of the terrain without improving your opponent's game. With these things in mind, we can jump ahead and make the second steps. That's more towards the placement of the terrains, because now you already understood what you have to know about your deck. You have already decided if you want to improve your game or compensate your weakness, right? So at this point, we move to the terrain placement, which is the step number 2, and to do that, you must know your enemy as well. I sound like Sun Tzu, right, in Art of War, but it comes very close, because after all, it is a war game. If you know your enemy, you know how you can place terrains to fit it better for you than for your opponents. Okay, so come with me to the tabletop simulator where we can do some more placements. Okay, so now that you have already decided which terrain you are going to use with your Seeker, it's time to play the game, right? Here I have all the terrains just to help me out, position them on the mat here for us to take a look. But let's pretend we are playing Vorendal against Polynor, the 2 Seekers that I gave example previously on this video. So Vorendal has the Deathshot Mire and Polynor has the Starcast Hall. The first thing you have to understand is whoever plays first has the advantage. For example, my strategy with Polynor choosing Starcast Hall, it's because I have a lot of channel spells that I cast. And my strategy with Vorendal choosing Deathshroud it's because I have a lot of ambush units, okay? So if I am Vorendal and I play first, I will, for example, place this terrain over here, because I have line of sight from both these deploy zones that I can charge with my Duskwood Prowler, for example, and already do damage before my opponent activates. If I'm playing with Polyonor first, I will most likely put, for example, this terrain over here to protect this deployment zone from this very same strategy that I told you about. Regardless who starts first on this specific example, it doesn't really matter. Let's pretend that Vorendal placed this terrain over here first to make the strategy I told you about, to manage to charge these two, and Polyonor defensively protect this deployment zone. Vorendal now will probably, let's just presume, place this terrain over here to cover this deployment zone. Note that now we start to see very specific aspects of placements, which is the rotation. If I place this big part, large terrain here, like this, because I didn't have any other terrains to compare or to use as reference, I will be open to just jumping here, and the line of sight is all open throughout this place, okay? Which means that when Vorendal places the second terrain, the medium one, he can place it so that he can charge here, which is one of the deployments which was away from his reach. So I have reach for this deployment zone, but I also can just turn a little bit and use this window as line of sight to shoot inside the other terrain, right? So this placement allows me that if by some reason I start with Vorendal here, I can move my Dead-at-Arms at here, for example, and have line of sight for this terrain. So these kind of placements, they are important. Maybe this wasn't the best example, but how one terrain interacts with the other, it's a major issue for us, okay? Well, keep on placing the terrains, it's Polyonor's turn. Since Vorendal is here, trying to get this deployment zone and this one, I can also protect it, for example, like this. It is 3, so I can place here one of my terrains, and I'm blocking the most part of the line of sight this terrain would give to this deployment zone. Of course, you can still reach my units if they were over here, but at this point, if I was doing the deployment, I can deploy here, for example. He won't manage to reach from here, because it's too far, and he won't have line of sight for the most part of my deployment zone. So I have a safe spot here if I lose the initiative, for example. And besides that, these entrances, they are targeting or allowing me to target inside the Deathshroud Mire. So if one of the relics here that are open is the bow that gives me line of sight inside the Deathshroud Mire, I will be better positioned than him. So at this point, Polyonor is managing to place the terrains to counter the Vorendal's strategy. If Polyonor was the first one, Vorendal would be doing the same, okay? I could, for example, place this terrain over here. Let's pretend that Polyonor placed here. I could place this one to block line of sight with the tall obstacle part from this bunker, right? So the thing that I want you guys to understand is, while placing your terrains, you have to make a strategy out of it, okay? You have to choose if you want to use your terrains to both be aggressive to enforce your strategy, and actually to block the high points from your enemy. Well, in this example, this is what I want to show you guys, and let's pretend now that I'm going to play with Thunder Steps. And for Thunder Steps, I want to reach my enemies as fast as possible, but I want to make sure that I will have an open path to do so, right? So when I place my big terrain, if I go, for example, with Noxious Round, right? If I place it here in the middle of the battlefield, I'll probably create hallways to play. Nobody's going to just cross this, we don't have that many relevant flying units. So while you're placing a terrain that blocks movement, right, I will create the hallways, which can be useful because, I don't know, let's pretend I'm playing against Sylph. She's going to place the large terrain in a way that she benefits both starting zones, both deployment zones, right? So I can keep my game to decide to which direction I want the game to flow. For example, if I place this terrain, I don't know, over here, like so, this deployment zone will most likely come through here, because here's a very dangerous part. So if my opponent starts here, most of the times they will move throughout the Asterios pathway, because I'm directing the game there. Of course, they can pass through this narrow part over here, but you have to agree with me that only one unit fits here, so I could come from the other side and engage one unit for one unit. The others, if I'm playing, remember, Thundersteps against Sigurd, right? So Thundersteps will be with one unit engaging. Sigurd can have protection units on the back line, but those units would do nothing, right? They would just stay there because they are all melee units. So it doesn't help very much the Order's gameplay. So placing like this, regardless of what Order does, let's pretend, I don't know, the terrains come here and this one over here to make it even worse for this deployment zone, right? What I'm doing here is directing my opponent to where I want the game to be, right? We all know that this is a bad deployment zone, right? Because we have a lot of obnoxious terrains over here, and this last one I'll place, for example, very close to this deployment, okay? And the last one over here. Awesome. Well, in this game, we see that most of the game will most likely play in this hallway, right? Even if we start on these sides, we unlikely will want to come here, because it's dangerous path. If I, as Thundersteps, start here, I will also go through here to enjoy or to use the most out of my opponent's terrain, the pathways, to make my units jump from one terrain to another and reach faster my enemy's deployment zone. So you see, you can direct the game. You can direct the game the way you want the game to be shaped. Okay, so that's the third step I want you guys to be very aware of. That's you must always try to enforce your strategy. If I want the game to be very engaged, played in narrow parts, that's what I have to do. I have to make one half of the map bad for my opponent, right? And when we talk about enforcing strategies, this comes the Husk part, the Husk placement. Husks have to be placed from 10 inches of each other. So if I place, for example, one Husk over here, right on the very edge inside the terrain, in a way, especially if it cannot be gathered from the outside, like here for example, what I'm doing, I'm preventing my opponent to place a Husk on this whole area, which means that all the other 3 Husks will most likely be, for example, here, here, and here. I'm concentrating the Husks on one specific half of the map, because I placed this one over here. Of course, this can be over here as well. It's not on the first placement, you cannot dictate the whole Husk placements, but on the second one you already can, right? Because if I place here and Sigurd places there, I can place this one over here and he will be obliged to play, for example, like this, okay? Because of the 10-inch radius from this one. It will be covering all this half, the bottom half of the map, so I push his placement on top. That's why Husk placement is also very important in this game. Placing the Husks in a place on the map, you decide which areas won't be used for placement. So Thundersteps wants the game to go to that area over there, right on the top here. So I place where I don't want the game to happen, in a very bad position for everybody actually, because it's inside the Noxious round, so a unit will take at standard time, right? 6 damage, 1 for entering and 1 for activating on the next turn. And the game will unfold over here. That's where I want. Even if I start here, I can quickly jump to this relic and then fight my opponent for the next one. And he will have to come and come back. He cannot go around because it's not optimized. But you got the idea, right? Husk's placements, you have to think about not only your strategy, but who you are playing against, okay? And that's very important, because terrains and Husks, you place them not only for you, but against your opponents. If we take the first example, the Polionor against Vorendal with the Shoutmire, me as Polionor, I would probably place the Husk in a way that I would block a Husk to be placed inside the Shroudmire, so Vorendal's ambush would be less efficient. Another thing you have to bear in mind when placing the Husks in the terrains is that you can prevent your opponent or yourself after the beat, right, from getting the relic on round 1. For example, if I place this terrain over here, this medium Asterian's pathway, like so, the distance that I have from the border is bigger than a unit's base, even a small unit's base. It doesn't really fit to pass through this hallway, you see? So, like this, no unit can use this part, and even units that have 6 movement won't manage to reach this relic over here, because it's going to move like 6 here, another 3, and another 3. So if the Husk is right on the bottom of the terrain, it will be more than 1 inch away from the unit, and from the outside as well. So units that standard move 6 cannot reach the relic on round 1. So this deployment zone can only reach a relic if it goes inside the Noxious Realm, and even so, not really. Let's see. If I move 10 plus 2, yeah. Only if I move inside the Noxious Realm, which, let's agree, nobody wants to take 6 damage just to be close to relic. So if you place your terrains and your Husk carefully, you can make the first round very slow for your opponents. Another example, we have several Seekers, namely Vorendal, Auric, Sigurd, that have only 5 movement. So if you place a relic, it doesn't have to be inside the terrain, but at 12 inches from the deployment zone, the Seeker cannot reach it, because it moves on 5. Okay, we have several units that have 6 movement on the Seeker's warband, but a unit taking the relic instead of the Seeker is a really good thing for us, right? So if you place it a little bit away from the deployment zone, if you win the bid, you can, for example, prevent the Seeker to have a relic on round 2, which is a big win for you, okay? Whether you are going to bid for initiative or deployment zones, I believe highly depends on the relics that open before your game, and the Seeker you have and the Seekers you are playing against. To know which relics are good for your Seekers, check out my deck building videos for more. So basically, when you choose the terrain for your Seeker's warband, you have to first know your Seekers, to understand its strengths and weaknesses, and decide what you want to compensate or what you want to enforce with the terrain choices. After you understand the Seekers, you have chosen your terrain, and then you are going to play a game. To play the game, you have to know your enemy, and then use this information to decide where you are going to place the terrains, to block your opponent's line of sight, terrains, or anything like that, or to dictate the flow of the battle and choose, or at least make one side of the map stronger or better for you guys to battle. And when placing the Husks, you want to make sure to enforce that strategy. You can use the Husk to choose a side more Husk heavy, let's say, of the map, or just to scatter them around to make better positioning or things like that. After you have done all of these steps, you have already chosen the Seeker, chosen the right terrain, and place it according to your strategy. I hope these little tips that I gave you guys, from placements, from distance, and what you take into account to position your terrains, will improve your game. And I hope you have enjoyed. If you have already not subscribed here, please do so right now, it helps me a lot. And please leave me a comment and tell me if this video helped you choosing the terrain and placing better for your future games. I look forward to hear from you guys, and stay tuned.